Phoenix Kitchen. My name is Stacy Williams and I'm your host. We're going to talk about fire, food, and flavor. We'll discuss recipes and techniques for both indoor and outdoor, where we'll add that secret ingredient, smoke, to get the most flavor out of all of our recipes. We're glad that you joined us today. While you're here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all our recipes. If you like the content, hit the thumbs up and leave us a comment. If you make the recipe, don't forget to share a pic. We're on the road to our first 1,000 subscribers. When we hit 1,000, we'll be giving away a 5-piece Lodge cast iron cookware set. To be entered for the giveaway, all you have to do is subscribe and leave us a comment. Now, on to our video.
So what is sausage? It's ground meat mixed with spices and herbs. It can be coarsely ground, finely ground, or ground into a paste. It can be stuffed into a casing or not put into a casing at all. Sausage types will vary tremendously as we go around the world. You'll find varieties such as andouille, bratwurst, bangers, chorizo, Italian, kielbasa, longaniza, and the list goes on, as every country has their favorite type of sausage. Sausage making is an ancient art with evidence of sausage production dating back to the Roman Empire, back to China, 580 BC, Greece, 900 BC, and 3000 BC in ancient Samaria. Today, we're going to be talking about breakfast sausage. The first breakfast sausage is thought to have originated in the 14th century in Germany. 19th century German immigrant Thomas Dutch is credited with creating the first dry cured breakfast sausage. It became a breakfast staple as farmers were able to make sausages from pork scraps, enabling them to provide a hearty breakfast meat for their family while maintaining the profit from better cuts of pork.
So the first thing we're going to deal with today is the meat. We're working with pork to make pork sausage. These are trimmings that I'm cutting up from a set of spare ribs. Once I cut down to a St. Louis style, all the other pieces are kept and frozen for later use. Right now we're taking off all of the pieces of meat that are usable and getting rid of all the cartilage. Now we're going to be using my KitchenAid stand mixer with the meat grinding attachment, so I can go with around a 1-inch cube to go through that grinder. I want this meat to remain partially frozen because as that grinder spins and the fat goes through it, the fat will emulsify as heat is added from the friction, and that will gum up the works. So it's very important that I keep this meat as cold as possible. Now all of this rib meat is going to go into the sausage. The remainder of the meat that we're cutting is pork belly from trimmings from making bacon. All right, so here we're looking at 5 pounds of pork trimmings from ribs and pork belly. It's about a 70-30 blend of fat to lean, which is a pretty good ratio. Often with beef, you're looking at an 80-20 ratio, but pork, just a little more fat really helps it to give you that good breakfast taste. Now, before we put it in the grinder, we do want to put this back in the freezer and let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes to really firm up. While we're waiting on that meat to freeze up and be ready for the grinder, we're going to go ahead and mix our spices now. This is our recipe for our breakfast sausage. We're going to be making the 5-pound batch. I did show, just for reference, what it would look like if we had ended up with only 4 pounds. We can adjust that down by simply doing the math. Now, we're not going to discuss how to do the math here because this is about cooking sausage. And if this video were sponsored, which it's not, I would tell you at this point to go to Skillshare and learn how to do math. They have lessons over there for you. Now, we'll be using my Ozeri digital scale found on Amazon. I'll put a link down below in the description if you're interested in one. It does measure in ounces, pounds, grams, milliliters, everything that you need for your kitchen. It's vital that you have one, really, because when you're making recipes like this, you'll notice we're using grams, not ounces, not teaspoons, not quarter teaspoons. We want to get exact measurements so that our blend is perfect. Same way with baking. You really want to make sure you're going by weight, not by volume. So we're mixing all of the spices here, all of the herbs, measuring them out, making sure they're exact the way we need it, adding it to the large hopper where we'll mix everything together. Now, just something of interest for me personally, we use sage from our own garden that's been dried and crushed. I do have to, in this particular recipe, because I'm at the end of my sage for this season, until I get some more dried, I do have to go in with a little bit of store-bought just to finish it out. Now that the spices are mixed, we're going to set those to the side and get our grinder assembled. Now I use a KitchenAid stand mixer with attachment for grinding meat. This is a 5-quart KitchenAid, so middle of the road as far as power goes. The grinding tool works great. It's fine working small batches like this, 5 pounds or less. One thing that I am looking forward to in the future for making multiple sausages is moving up to a real high quality, high power meat grinder, because this thing, it's slow. Okay. So you'll see here, we take off the covering cap on the front. Now we're going to continue putting this together according to the directions. One of the things that you'll notice when you're working with this is that you do have 2 different blades you can use. The blade only goes in one direction, so make sure that you check your instructions to see the picture of how the blade installs. When you're putting on the grind guards, the other thing to note is we're going to go through with a larger grind first and then go back through with a second grind. So one of the things that slows down the process, but I can't go through that fine mesh on this grinder the first time through because of the power that this grinder has. It's simply not strong enough. We end up gumming up the works and can burn up the motor. So we're going to run it through coarsely and then bring it back through for a little bit finer grind after we've mixed in our seasonings. And that'll actually help us to get the seasoning a little more thoroughly mixed. Now you see here, we've come out of the freezer, nice and firm. That fat is frozen and it's coming through without melting, which means we're not going to gum up the works. We're going to go ahead and get all 5 pounds of this ground. Then we're going to go in and add our seasonings. All right, so to mix the seasonings, we're definitely going to move back to our larger bowl because it does take some room to be able to mix these together. I will say, if you notice, I'm wearing a thermal glove with a latex glove over it. That latex glove is not for food safety. That's really just because this stuff is ice cold. And if you've ever played with ice cubes, you know what that'll do to your hands over a long period of time. So I go in and add the second one as we're going to do the seasoning because we're going to need both hands to really get that in. I go in with a little seasoning at first. And you notice there's push, squeeze, turn, push, squeeze, turn is kind of the method that we're using to ensure that we get all around. That's a lot of meat sitting on the bottom of the bowl. After that first batch has been mixed in, I go in with the rest of it and then just keep going, turning, looking for places that you don't see seasoning. We want to make sure it's everywhere. And then we want to roll out a test patty and cook it. We've got to make sure this is seasoned properly before we go through that second grind. This is our opportunity to adjust. There's no reason to serve food that isn't properly seasoned. It's not properly balanced, that doesn't taste good. So we're going to go through and cook this up. I'm using cast iron with a little oil. You can see there how that pork really browns up and gets a nice crispy crust. You can see herbs and spices sticking through because we use large grind spices. We use that fresh dried sage and crushed up. Now you see me here. We don't have the volume because, as I told you earlier, I forgot to turn on the microphone like an idiot. It happens. But you can see that first bite. That is not Oscar-winning acting. That's just what it's like when it tastes that good. You'll never find a store-bought sausage that tastes like homemade. They don't take the love and care. They don't use the quality of the meat that you're choosing. You get to decide how much fat's in it, how much salt is in it, how many herbs and spices are in it, because you can really take this recipe and make it your own. But it's very, very important to do the taste test. It's the one thing that you can do to set your cooking apart from everyone else's. Make sure that you know that it's good and ready to serve. Now, like we said earlier, we're going to run that through a second time. Not going to bother to show that because it looks exactly like the first time through. It just comes out a little finer. Now, the last thing we want to do is go ahead and portion this up into containers to go into the freezer and the fridge. This will keep in the fridge for about a week. We did not use curing salt, so about a week is enough time for it. I put these in 1 pound containers because that's about how much we'll eat over the course of a week. One will go into the fridge today, and the remainder of them will go into the freezer to pull out. Usually takes about a day for them to thaw. And you can see here, I go ahead and shape them like the same little chubs that you would buy at the grocery store, because that familiarity makes them a little easier for you to use. Hope you enjoyed our video today. Thanks everyone for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments down below. Till next time, bye.